Sitting in a zendo, I'd often, and I know that other people have talked to me about this experience, looked round at the other people there and thought, how come everyone's so much better at this than I am? They're sitting much more upright. They're not fidgeting. They're clearly, they're not getting distracted. What's this about? It must be really terrible. Why are they so much better at this than me? But then, sometimes, I'd end up thinking, you lot, you're useless. Look at that guy over there, slouching, just completely collapsed. How are we going to just not sitting properly or straining, it's kind of, whoa. It's like they're looking to levitate off to heaven or something else. It's just fidgeting or coughing, any of the rubbish things that people are thinking, who are these guys? What's this about? And of course I might remember Barry saying, and what's he say? You can't do it wrong. I'm not doing it any worse than them. They're not doing it any worse than me. Where's the problem? And yet, I clearly am doing it wrong because now I'm judging. Now I'm thinking I'm better. Now I'm thinking I'm worse. Now I'm not supposed to do that. That's really uncomfortable. I feel dreadful. I'm clearly doing it wrong even though you can't do it wrong. What's that about? And we can play this game with ourselves forever. And maybe not in quite that way, but in different forms. We do play it forever. And we can get really judgmental with ourselves for judging. Okay, but actually, why is that a problem anyway? I mean, what do I think that judging is bad anyway? Why am I judging like that? Do I think it's good not to judge? Do I think it's Buddhist not to judge? Do I think my mind's supposed to be really, like empty man, really quiet? So clearly judging interferes with that. What's the actual problem here? Well, first off, let's just think about what's actually happening when I'm judging and then judging myself for judging and then judging myself for judging myself about judging. I'm kind of kicking it up through these levels. If we were going to want a, kind of nice posh word for it, we could say meta levels, meta judgments. Judging my judging, judging my judging of my judging. And clearly, this becomes a kind of spiral, doesn't it? It's not even circular. I'm just going around the same loop as I disappear up into the stratosphere or somewhere. But what's really going on, and how do I work with that? What do I do about that? Well, actually the first thing in really, kind of boring practical terms is, in terms of ordinary mind practice, notice my discomfort. Notice that this is making me feel queasy, uneasy. Whether that was the hit of thinking I'm really cool, or the kind of crushing of thinking I'm really pathetic, or just the actual, oh, ouch, judgment, oh, I didn't know I was doing that. Because this is practice, this is what we have to work with, practice, this is material. No resistance, no discomfort, no practice, really. I mean, Joko used to think of that in terms of pain, kind of, you will sit until your knee feels like it's going to explode, and then you will sit with that. Why? Because, you get used to it. Gives you something to work with. That's not Barry's way, not my way, but you can understand the direction that that's leading. This discomfort is, in its way, much more subtle, isn't it? It's kind of emotional, physical. And that's interesting because emotional, physical are actually intellectual, emotional, physical is really good because we're joining up loads of things here and we're finding the actual manifestation in the body of what's going on. And ultimately, what's going on in the body is really rather more important than what's going on in the mind, because when it gets to screaming pitch and I have to move, it's my body that moves. And it's actually my body that tells my body, we're moving. Don't care what he thinks he's doing. I know he thinks he's just sitting here, motionless. We're moving. We're out here. It's the body which rules, really, end of the day. But actually sitting with that, feeling that discomfort or need to move or whatever, this actually is our practice. And when it's intellectual, emotional, physical, that's really getting interesting because we're beginning to get down into what judgment actually is and what judgment is actually about. We've been talking in terms of identities, and then we've mentioned the idea of Buddhist view, kind of view we get stuck in. And that is always in terms of some kind of identity. And what we're doing here, well, what I was just talking about is obviously framing identities. Not a good meditator, fidgeter, vastly impressive, sits like a mount, and yeah, okay. It's not a question of whether it's true in that moment or true forever. It's that kind of labelling, taking a position relative to better, worse. What's really happening when we're judging here is that we're separating. It's not the thinking, it's not the mental activity that's the problem. It's the separation which we're creating in terms of view, in terms of identity. And it's not simply separating from the other. Obviously, I identify you. I now think of you in that way. I now expect you to be like that. Good enough. But by setting up this comparison, by separating me and you off, I'm actually identifying me as well. I'm actually saying, in relation to you, I'm like that. So I'm creating an identity for myself. I'm creating a view of myself. And if I actually hold on to that, what have I lost? Well, I've lost me. Because actually you and I only really exist in relationship. As relationship, if I've lost you, I've lost me too. I'm creating two images that I'm saying, measuring against each other, judging against each other. And neither of them are me, and neither of them are you. So how could we ever actually meet? How could we ever look each other in the eye? Because now we're just an idea of each other. And as soon as we're doing that, well, we're tending more or less inevitably, and I've started using the word contract of late, as in legal contract, because it seems to actually begin to sum up this quite well. A contract by its nature is instrumental, it's transactional, as we say. It's what can I get from you, and what can I expect that you'll expect to get from me? And when we meet, you and I, is this how we're approaching each other? Or what can he do for me? What can she do for me? Or what does she think she's going to get out of me? And then we have the idea of fulfilling the contract or not, or breaking the contract. You said you'd do this, or I expected you to be like that. In either cases, we're losing the living reality of flow of the possible, of the unexpected, of not knowing. Another idea we keep coming back to. This is another. When I have identified you, I know, or I think I know. Can I hold my not knowing, my openness? Meet you with openness and possibility? So in fact, by judging you, I've lost relationship. I've lost belonging. I've lost being together. So why do we do this? What do I think I'm actually getting out of it? I mean, that actually is quite an interesting question, isn't it? It's quite easy not to go beyond the simple facts there and go, oh yes, I know I shouldn't do this. I'm obviously a terrible person. Or, oh, well, it's just human nature. Everybody does, all the time. Ha! Nothing we can do about it. Maybe if we practice really hard, we'll stop. I think there's more interesting things we can say. What's the point? What's judging for when it actually splits us off from each other, splits us off from ourselves? We're just misrecognizing. Well, we obviously judge because we've been judged. We grew up being judged. And we grew up with the expectation, slowly arriving at, of being judged. And of learning that we can judge others in turn. And why do we do that? It's fairly straightforward. We can call it status, and technically this is what we're talking about. It doesn't really do it, does it? It's if you're arguing with your brother or your sister, it's not, well, I'm claiming higher status than you, but in a sense, that's what it is. And if we talk about the big picture, that's what we're doing, claiming status but also belonging. And it seems to be a real problem that we have difficulty disentangling status from belonging. I want to be part of us, but I want to be top dog. Or at least I don't want to be bottom dog, or at least I'm worried that you might try and be top dog, so I'm now worried about whether or not I can stop you being top dog, and the only way to do that is to judge you and then affirm that you're bottom dog. And I mean, we do this, you and I do this, we did it as children, we do it as adults. Nations do it. You look at the pathetic state of, Russia, America. I mean, it's... I would expect better of 5-year-olds, but we don't get it. So, this is not just about me, it's not just about you, it's about the world, but it's one of the key things we do. So we judge because we're judged, and because we judge, we're inviting being judged back, and it's really inevitable. It's like a war of all against all, permanently. And no wonder we feel stressed by this, and no wonder we feel judged by this, and no wonder we reflexively respond in the way that we do to that. And if it is a war of all against all we use the status word again, but again, maybe being something, maybe being someone, maybe success, however we're thinking in terms of success, which is almost always in terms of an identity. Oh yes, I'm a success because I have 2,000 friends on Facebook or whatever, or I'm a success because I have this, or I have that, or I'm a failure because I lack this, lack that, so-and-so has that. Hence, and judgment. I mean, clearly this is the exact opposite to what we know gives us a sense of actually being ourselves in a deeper and more meaningful sense, which is relationship. And this, contract obviously has its place, but it's the opposite of relationship. And the greater we treat life as a series of contracts, and heaven knows these days we're encouraged to think of every aspect of our lives as contractual, well, to the extent that we do that, we make relationship impossible. As I said, that we can think relationship in hugely wide terms, And we can understand somebody says, well, frankly, I don't get on with people, but I have a great relationship with a dog, and basically he keeps me going. Yeah, okay. I get that. Why? Because, well, your dog's not judging you, and hopefully you don't feel the need to judge your dog. Or any sentient being, anything we can begin to consider as a sentient being that I can open to relationship with. So to get back to the cushion, get back to wherever it is, and to get back to the experiencing of being embodied, which we do place as an absolute priority within our tradition of ordinary mind. When I feel judged, when I notice that I've been judging, and if we do this practice, we do start to notice when we're judging, and weirdly, in the way that Zen actually works, the more we notice we're judging, the less often and less harshly we tend to judge, or the more easily and lightly we put down our judgments and don't hang on to them, don't fix them, don't freeze them, to use that lovely word of Diane Rossetto's. So how do we feel? What's happening when we feel this tightening, this tension, this queasiness? Because being judged, or heavens, I thought that is that really a good way to think of somebody, another human being, or a whole group of human beings? Ouch. And what do we do when we notice that, when we feel that tightening, or that queasy feeling? We stop. And I really like Dan Rossetto's practice question. Okay, you're feeling this, you're feeling judged, or you're panicking. Ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen if I'm judged? If I'm being judgmental? What's the worst thing that could happen? And we just sit with that. Okay, where does my mind want to take me, and where does my mind want to take my body? Does it want to take me to that place of failure and collapse? Does it want to take me to that place of self-assertion, self-righteousness? How dare they? The anger of that, the heat. What's important, what's absolutely vital here, and central aspect of practice, is that I allow myself to tell the story without believing it. That I can tell the story, but in brackets, as it were. That I allow myself to step back from it, not to dissociate from it. So, I'm not responding, or rather, I'm not reacting. I'm not wandering off. I'm not distracting myself. I'm just being with. Being with a body that's feeling rubbish. That's feeling deeply uncomfortable, perhaps. Depends how it takes you, But I'm being with this body, allowing it to experience these feelings. Noticing, oh, okay, this is the story. This is the little movie. This is the judgment and self-judgment that comes with this. And if I can do that, if I create the space, and again, Jocko's wonderful phrase of a bigger container, the more I sit with this, the more I don't send myself reeling off in panic or rush off and want to hit somebody. But the more I just sit with this, the actual experiencing of this, the more I become this bigger container, less sharply defined from the world. That's one of the really interesting things always, that the bigger container I become, the softer my edges. The softer the interface between me and the world, the greater interpenetration of this thing, me, whatever that is, with world, becomes more possible. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, that's what we each have to sit with in each individual occasion. And maybe it always comes down to the same thing. I fear rejection. Oh, fair. I fear exclusion. I fear this. I fear that. Absolutely. Can we find the space? Can we find the caring to let us go there and simply be there and rest there and take care of ourselves while we're there? So like the pain in the knee, the kind of sting of being judged, the gut punch of being told to your face, the feeling that there's somebody or something behind you. Can we begin to hold these things as not knowing, seeing the story, hearing the story, but not identifying with it, not keying into that as the truth, not keying into that as, yes, that's my true identity, or no, I reject this identity, I'm really this person. But just simply the not knowing and the experiencing of this, feeling whatever it is, in the body, in this body, in me. All of those feelings around judgment, around being judged and judging, are kind of approaching what I want to talk about, following, which is where we don't want to go, which is the S word, shame in all its varieties, whether that's embarrassment or angry reaction. And we think about the reactions to that in terms of honour, pride, machismo, or whatever version it is. But, these are just our bouncing off from these feelings of what I will call shame. Can we begin to actually be with what we don't want to be with? To go where we don't want to go? Strapline for Star Trek used to be to boldly go where no man has gone before. I don't know whether we can manage boldly, but if we can manage to go there, if we can manage to hold this, we're certainly going where few have dared. But I think it's worth the journey. boldly go. We'll pick up on that next week.